Next up, we're going to go back to current gen Monster Hunter to one that debuted in World. This is Titiaku. Titiaku is a nimble, medium-sized creature. I believe it's a bird wyvern. Getting a lot of mileage out of the wiki today. Confirmed, Titiaku is considered a bird wyvern in the same family as Kuluyaku, we'll see later on. But this thing inhabits the Coral Highlands, and it looks like a raptor, and it has these frills, or these little tendrils on its head that expand out into these large webbing things, kind of like the Jurassic Park Dilophosaur. And when it does that, it can flashbang the area right in front of it, creates a brilliant flash that blinds everything like a flash bomb. And as a result, it tends to be a nuisance a lot of times whenever you're hunting things in the Coral Highlands. It'll walk around, walk into a fight, flash everything, and then just sort of peace out. I think its design sort of balances against the annoyance factor. When you're fighting it itself, it's not too difficult, but it does get annoying because if you're not careful, you'll get blinded and stunned. I'm going to put Titiaku on C tier. I think it's a little more obnoxious than something like the Gyros, and while I do like its raptor design and little flappy things on its head, I feel like it doesn't really stand out as much, so I'm going to drop it below Great Gyros here on C tier. Next up, we have the true mascot of the Monster Hunter series, going all the way back to the original on PS2. We have good old Wrathios. Wrathios has been in every single game in the series, as far as I know. Of the flying type wyverns, it's considered a mid-game target usually. Something for people getting past the beginner stages to try and take on. The King of the Skies is its title, I believe. Wrathios is great. It's gone through some minor design iterations throughout the years, but it's always looked cool. And its fight, I would say, tends to run a spectrum. The older games, well, at least in Freedom Unite from what I can remember, tend to fly a lot. I think its fight is probably the most refined in the current generation, World and Iceborne. But between its classic design, its iconic status, and the fact that its fight is decent, I would put Wrathios up here on A tier. I'm going to put it below Odo because I like Odo's design more. But I feel like it'd be a disservice to the OG monsters to not put Wrathios up here, because it's essentially the poster child for the series. Whenever you look at the box art for the older games, a lot of times it's a Wrathios on the cover. And you gotta respect that. So Wrathios, you go up here in A tier. Next up, we have the first deviant on the list here. This deviant is Dreadking Rath. I think that's what it's called. It's been a while since I played Generations Ultimate. Yeah, Dreadking Rath. This one is very similar to the regular Wrathios, but its wings are different. It has, I think, bigger wings and a different patterning, and its coloring is a little bit different. It looks like a more evolved regular Wrathios. Dreadking is a challenge to fight. It tends to fly and has the ability to throw or launch these exploding hazard projectiles, in addition to these big nuke-sized flames. It's interesting. I think Dreadking is sort of just an extension of Wrathios, and in the original games and Generations, a lot of its gear tended to be pretty good, which a lot of people went for Dreadking sets because of the skills they imparted. But overall, I would say this deviant doesn't do a whole lot differently from the regular one. I'm going to put Dreadking on C tier, but I'm going to put it... I think I'm going to put it above Ebony, but below Toby. I don't think its design is unique enough to really push it towards the top of C tier. The fact that its fight is challenging, I'm going to put it sort of in the middle. We'll see how it shakes out later. The deviants are going to be interesting. I think they're very subjective in how they're ranked here. Well, we'll put Dreadking here for now. Next up, Azerathalos. Azerathalos is a subspecies of the red version, and in all the games that Azerathalos has shown up in, it's always had a slightly different moveset. It tends to be more airborne in general, but it doesn't do a whole lot different than the regular version. It's iconic enough to be on a couple boxes. I want to say the US version of 3U had Azerathalos on the cover. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've seen the box art for all these. But overall, I feel like Azerathalos, while I do like its blue coloring, it doesn't stand out as much to me. So I'm going to put it down here on C tier, and I'm going to put it below Titiaku, Gyros, and Ebony Odo, just because its design is not too memorable. I do think it's more annoying to fight, which drops it down a couple tiers automatically. But beside it being a blue Wrathion, there's really not much to Azer. I think its home down here is pretty justified in my opinion. Next up we have another species of Rathalos, Silver Rathalos. Now this one I don't remember how it's even categorized. Okay. According to the wiki, these are rare species. That sounds right, because technically Azerathalos is a subspecies of the regular one, even though it doesn't have a different element. But silver is considered rare, and silver has always been an endgame target. This one I have not hunted in Iceborne yet because my hunter rank's not high enough, but I have hunted tons of silver in the older games, so I'm going to sort of judge its ranking based on what I've experienced in the older games. And silver is challenging, but I do think it looks cool, and its fight, while difficult, is not unbearable. I rate it higher than Azer for sure, but I think I'm going to put it towards the lower part of B tier. For this one, I feel like the design carries it a little bit more. The all silver with darker highlights look, the metallic look of the Wraths, both gold and silver, rate higher than their regular subspecies, I think. But the fact that I never enjoyed fighting silver would keep it from being up here in like S or A tier. So we'll go ahead and put it down here in B tier. Definitely above average and a unique target. If you can get to fighting these things, it's usually worth it, both from a gameplay experience perspective and also the gear you get from fighting those targets. Next up, we've got another mainstay of the older games. We have Wrathion, the female counterpart to Rathalos, Queen of the Earth, I believe is her title. Wrathion is interesting. The fact that it's essentially just the same species of monster, just the other gender, and is interesting, but also the fact that the monster itself behaves very differently. As her title suggests, Wrathion spends more time on the ground. He's a big fan of charges, fireballs, and tail swipes, in addition to some acrobatic flips that she does. Wrathion is usually encountered earlier than Rathalos and is sort of a mid to early game target. Another lesson in teaching the players how to react to monster patterns and sort of getting you prepped for dealing with Rathalos, who's a bit more of a handful. Between her design and the fight, I put Wrathion on B tier. I'm going to say upper B tier. I'll put her ahead of Chaotic. I don't think I like Wrathion in design and fight better than Toby, but I will put her up here just because her iconic nature and the fact that she is interesting to fight goes here. Overall, I think the game would be incomplete without having both the Wraths there, and they've sort of fine-tuned the fight with Wrathion over the years, and overall I think she deserves a spot near the upper part of the tier. Next up, we have the corresponding deviant version for Wrathion. This is Dreadqueen. Dreadqueen Wrathion is interesting in that, like Dreadking, it's a more advanced, difficult version of the Wrathion fight. But while Dreadking focuses on flying and lighting everything on fire, Dreadqueen focuses on poison. And this particular monster is very aggressive, and everything she does, from her tail swipes to the flips and everything, usually leaves poison hazards on the ground. Kind of like what they've done with Toby here. But if you don't go into the Dreadqueen fights without some sort of poison mitigation, you will die because it's everywhere. Design-wise, it's sort of like a regular Wrathion with some more poison spikes. It's not bad, but the fact that the fight is not pleasant, and the fact that the design isn't too different, I'm going to put Dreadqueen further down towards C tier. I don't feel like it's bad enough to drop the monster down to D, but I wouldn't rate it as highly as the other people or monsters here on the list as far as memorability and the fight. So we'll put Dreadqueen down here. Next up, the subspecies for Wrathion. We have Pink Wrathion. And this one is sort of a high rank transition monster usually. In the previous games, Pink Wrathion behaves somewhat similar to the regular version, but includes the deadly 360 tail flip thing that she does. Kind of like Azerathalos, I feel like the design is not too different from the original, and the fight tends to be a bit more annoying. Not quite as annoying as Constant Poison, so I'm going to put Pink Wrathion below Azerathalos here in C tier. Overall, not bad, but I would say not high enough to be out of C tier. And finally, for the last of the Wraths, I think for this list, we've got Gold Wrathion. Gold Wrathion is essentially kind of like Silver being the hard mode for the Wrath series. Gold Wrathion is the hard mode version of the whole Wrathion line. Again, I haven't done Gold Wrathion in World or Iceborne yet, but from the older games, there tended to be a lot more focus on fire, where fireballs gain a lot more destructive effects, and it was a lot faster. And while I don't feel like it's necessarily super high on the tier list, I do like the design for Gold Wrathion a lot. Just similar to what I said for Silver. The focus on the metallic highlights and overall look is interesting. So I'm going to put Gold Wrathion higher up in C tier. I'm going to put her above Dreadking. Again, a good endgame target, but decently challenging. So I think that'll do it for the Wraths. Next up, we have a pretty infamous monster in the series. We have Kezu. Kezu's not shown up in a couple games. It's not in the current generation for World and Iceborne. I believe it was in Generations and Generation Ultimate. Kezu's a flying type wyvern. I've talked about it before. It's sort of a blind, lamprey-like creature with a stretchy neck. It's very unsettling and has no musical theme. You fight it in dead silence, and it will shock you senseless with its electricity. Despite the fact that a lot of people don't like Kezu, I think it's a memorable creature because it really stands out from a lot of the regular dragon or lizard or other type beast creatures in the library for Monster Hunter. It's got a unique design, and its fight is okay. I feel like it's not the best, but I don't really see the reason why people hate this monster so much. It's interesting. I think its design outweighs its fight a little, but not enough to push it in the upper tiers. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of Kezu as far as up here in B or A. I'm going to put it here in C tier, sort of in the middle. If it wasn't for the fact that it looks different from a lot of the cast and is just sort of unsettling in general, it'd probably be down here in D tier, honestly. But overall, I think Kezu's memorable enough. Whether you like it or not, people know it. And I think that's worth putting somewhere in the middle. Now, Kezu's subspecies, Red Kezu, is basically just a stronger, more angry version of the original. It doesn't have a different element, it's still Thunder element, but adds a slightly different moveset and is more of a challenge. Because it's not quite as memorable or different, I guess distinct would be the better word, from the regular Kezu, I think I'm going to put Red Kezu down here at the top of D tier. I do like its color patterning, but it really doesn't stand out to me. It's sort of just another target, and it has different gear. The gear does different things too, but the fight and the design are not super distinct. We'll put Red Kezu here, sort of the upper end of D tier, and we'll see if the later ones force it further down.